people will trickle in. And so here's what I want you to know about the story, if you haven't been here before, is that it is open for discussion. You can speak, you can ask questions. We talk during the sermon. It is a dialogical space. Also, we sing our music family style. So just think of a reunion at the lake, sitting out around, and we sing with guitars and nothing fussy. There's no bulletin. You can't check anything off. We're not in any order. The only thing that we do the same every single week is that we open with a video. And I'm really excited to share this week's video with you. It's from one of my dear friends. We've been friends for many years here, and she has just an incredible testimony to share. And so take a look at this one.
We joined the church in January, which was a really high point for us. We have been welcomed with open arms and put to work, which is exactly what we needed. We needed to be put to work. We felt like we didn't have a place to be servants, God's servants. So here we are, and we're very happy, both of us. I will tell you, though, I wasn't Methodist when I was born. My parents were both Catholic, so there was no question that you'd be baptized Catholic. And so that's what happened, and I was very happy. I embraced my Catholic school, and I was taught by an order of nuns, the Sisters of Charity of the Incarnate Word. I loved their outfits, their habits. I thought they were just the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I aspired to be a nun for a very, very brief period of time because I thought it would be cool to be a bride of God. That really spoke to my little Catholic soul. My parents were very good about taking us to church as life went on. I made my communion, my confirmation. I was married in the Catholic Church. That did not work out. It was not a good marriage. And back in those days, marrying in the Catholic Church held a different feel than it does now. And I was married for 3 years and I had a little boy. My husband left, so I was on my own. So I sought counseling with my priest because that's what I was trained to do, raised to do. I knew nothing about any other religion except the Catholic Church. So I was very interested in what he would help me find my way for the rest of my life. I was really young. A couple of years later, I met this wonderful man who I'm still married to, and we'll be married 50 years in January. So that counseling was excellent, except he didn't tell me I should find a Catholic husband. And I had found a lovely Methodist husband who encouraged me and supported me if I really wanted to continue in my Catholic journey. However, at that point in time, in the early 70s, to divorce in the Catholic Church meant that I would no longer be able to receive the sacraments. And I could never remarry in the Catholic Church, which really kind of broke my heart. Walt suggested we go talk to his minister and see about counseling with him, which we did. And he invited us. He asked us to counsel with him just like the Catholics do pre-Cana. And he offered to marry us in his church, which became our church. So that's how I morphed from Catholic to Methodist. And along the way, one of the most supportive members of my family was my mother. And since it's Mother's Day, I feel moved to talk to moms in general. I had great role models. My mothers, my grandmother, my aunts. These were wonderful, stable women. Not everybody has that. I also believe that I know all women can't biologically have a child. And I actually think that's part of God's plan. because I think all those other wonderful women out there who can't maybe have a child of their own flesh and blood, have become for me, and I think for many children, what I call the backup mamas. I truly believe some of the best mentors in my life have been women that I am not related to. I have many women in my life right now that are school teachers, guidance counselors, just friends that have no child of their own, but have mothered so many other children. I benefited from it. My sister benefited from it. So for me, I can name many women that affected my life, including that first little nun that walked in first grade in her habit. And I immediately fell in love with Sister Mary Eileen and knew, by the way she treated me, that she was kind of like my school mama. And I stayed in touch with her for years. In fact, when I went to high school, the same order of nuns ran the high school. So I was able to stay in touch with all of them. Just because they wore a habit didn't make them less than a mother. Just because a school teacher walks in and it's Miss and not Mrs. doesn't mean she's not going to be a mama to these kids. There have been times when I feel here at this church, we were brought here so we can help be mamas and daddies. Whether it's little spivies running around, which I love, or big kids like Michael and Jackson, or all the beautiful children in between. I just feel like it's a great place for us to continue to be parents, to be good moms, to be good dads. I know some ladies in this church that maybe don't have their own children, but I see them mothering everybody else's children, and it does my heart good. So my Mother's Day message is, the good Lord gave everybody a mother, whether she is your adoptive mother, your neighbor mother, your aunt, your school teacher, your guidance counselor, or somebody you haven't even met yet that maybe needs some help from you. It's such a small thing to give back what He's given me in my life. So, all you mothers out there, whether you have your own children or adopted children or just you love everybody's children, I hope that you enjoy your day. Happy Mother's Day.
Oh, thank you for that. And you are definitely a great mother. Let's worship. Let's praise God. What are we singing?
What we singing, Regan?
God will work it out.
Before I knew my name, before I drew a breath, He was making ways for me. Now and every day, each and every step, He is making ways for me. When my heart is full of doubt, it feels like faith is running out. I've come too far to turn around. I know God will work it out. God will work it out. One thing I know, one thing I found, God
work it out, yeah.
Pushing past the fear, fighting to believe He is making ways for me. He won't let me down, never ever leave. He's still making ways for me. When my heart is full of doubt, it feels like faith is running out. I've come too far to turn around. I know God will work it out. God will work it out. One thing I know, one thing I found. God will work it out.
He's working it out right now. Yeah.
Be still, my soul. Be still and know. Lean in, take hold in God alone. Be still, my soul. Be still and know. Lean in, take hold in God alone. Be still, my soul. Be still and know. Lean in, take hold in God alone. God will work it out. God will work it out. One thing I know, one thing I found. God will work it out.
I want you to think about the thing that you need God to work it out in right now. And let's just acknowledge that God is working now.
God is working now. God is working now. One thing I know, one thing I found. God is working now.
So this is the perfect song for this day because it really vibes with the message well. Man, it's like a bullseye on today's message. And it's a message about being able to be empowered by God through faithfulness, through our journey, not perfection, through faithfulness. Trying to do what God has for us, trying to walk the path that God has for us. And how important that is in breaking cycles, unhealthy cycles. So I want you to think about yourself and the kind of life that you've endured, and think about the things that run through the bloodline of your own family. And I want you to think about the words of this song and have it look maybe differently than when you've sung it before, but just consider what God is doing in our midst.
There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power is power in the name of Jesus to break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. There's power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus to break every chain, 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 to break every chain. Sacrifice so freely given, such a price. Our redemption, heaven's gate, sweet wine. Oh, sufficient sacrifice, so freely given, such a price. Our redemption, heaven's gate, sweet wine. Yes, there's power. There is power in the name of Jesus. Power. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus to break every chain, 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 break every chain. There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up. There's an army rising up to break every chain, 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 break every chain. There's an army rising up. Oh Lord, there's an army rising up. Rising up in power. Oh yeah. To break every chain, 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 to break every chain. I just want you to visualize your issue, your problem. And then I want you just to look at it and I want you to sing at it, right? Because your weapon is a melody. Your weapon is the word of God being spoken, the word of power being spoken, who has dominion over your enemy, who has power over your enemy. See, you as a Christ believer and as a Christ follower, you can speak. You can speak in the power of his name, and you can know that the mountains will fall. You can know that they will move. You will know that God is working on your behalf. So you think and you visualize your problems, and then you sing to it. And you sing this, you sing this, you sing this. You go, oh, yeah, 'cause there is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus. There is power in the name of Jesus. You know what?
break every chain, to break every chain.
Break every chain, break every chain, break every chain.
Ooh, that was good.
The scripture today is out of Exodus chapter 20, verses 3 through 6. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents to the third and the fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. 2 Chronicles chapter 21, verses 1 through 2. Jehoshaphat slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. His son, Jehoram, succeeded him. He had brothers, the sons of Jehoshaphat, Azariah, Jehiel, Zechariah, Azariah, Michael, and Shephatiah. All these were the sons of King Jehoshaphat of Judah. Their father gave them many gifts of silver, gold, and valuable possessions, together with fortified cities in Judah. But he gave the kingdom to Jehoram because he was the firstborn. Jehoram ascended the throne of his father, and he strengthened himself, and he put all his brothers to the sword, as well as some of the officials of Israel. Jehoram was 32 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. He walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as the house of Ahab had done. For the daughter of Ahab was his wife. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet the Lord would not destroy the house of David because of the covenant that he had made with David, and since he had promised to give a lamp to him and to his descendants forever. In his days, Edom revolted against the rule of Judah and set up a king of their own. Then Jehoram crossed over with his commanders and all his chariots. He set out by night and attacked the Edomites, who had surrounded him and his chariot commanders. So Edom has been in revolt against the rule of Judah to this day. At that time, Libnah also revolted against his rule because he had forsaken the Lord, the God of his ancestors. Moreover, he made high places in the hill country of Judah and led the inhabitants of Jerusalem into unfaithfulness and made Judah go astray. A letter came to him from the prophet Elijah, saying, "Thus says the Lord, the God of your father David, because you have not walked in the ways of your father Jehoshaphat, or in the ways of King Asa of Judah, but have walked in the way of the kings of Israel and have led Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem into unfaithfulness, as the house of Ahab led Israel into unfaithfulness, and because you have also killed your brothers, members of your father's house, who were better than you, see, the Lord will bring a great plague on your people, your children, your wives, and all your possessions, and you yourself will have a severe sickness with a disease of your bowels until your bowels come out day after day because of the disease. The Lord aroused against Jehoram the anger of the Philistines and of the Arabs who are near the Cushites. They came up against Judah, invaded it, and carried away all the possessions they found that belonged to the king's house, along with his sons and his wives, so that no son was left to him except Jehoaz, his youngest son. After all this, the Lord struck him in his bowels with an incurable disease. In the course of time, at the end of 2 years, his bowels came out because of the disease, and he died in great agony. His people made no fire in his honor, like the fires made for his ancestors. He was 32 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 8 years in Jerusalem. He departed with no one's regret. They buried him in the city of David, but not in the tombs of the kings.
So wild story today, right? It's kind of a crazy story. And in this particular series, we're talking about looking at generational bloodlines to think about our own legacy, the things that we are going to leave behind to our children and their children. And so last week you had a conversation about legacy, and you looked at the Davidic bloodline that runs from Adam to King David, and the bloodline after that runs from David to Jesus. This is part of that bloodline, but it's a story we don't really hear much, right? Probably because it's gross. It is the world's worst case of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, if ever. It was terrible, a terrible way for King Jehoram to die. And so I did this exercise in a family systems class in seminary where I did each week, we laid out our family tree, and then each week we added layers to it. So it was kind of like layer upon layer upon layer of what your family system or network offers and what it can tell you about your life and your role and who you are within that network and all of that. And it was a really interesting exercise. And the first week when I laid out my family tree, what I ended up laying out was a gigantic Baptist bush. It was like the biggest Baptist tree I've ever seen. I was like, all of my family is Baptist, all of it. And so that's what I realized at first glance. And then I realized that Rachel and I were just this little tiny branch of Methodists, right? And really not even true to that, because I was Baptist in the beginning and you were non-denom and Baptist and Pentecostal and a whole bunch of motley other denominations, right? And so we were clearly the only branch of not Baptist people. And so there was that. So at first glance, it looked like that. And then there were some things as we layered over the weeks that I thought, oh, well, that's cool. So one of those layers was a lot of my ancestors, the people in my life, were either church workers, worship leaders, pastors. Both of my grandfathers were pastors. Both of my parents were worship leaders. And so you could tell that, and I liked that. But then we got to the week 4, and it was not good stuff. There was a bunch of divorce and smoking and alcohol and drugs, and I was like, oh my gosh, there's this layer of stuff, right? And so what this ended up revealing was, oh my gosh, we really can either pass down our good stuff or we can pass down some really sketchy stuff, And so I just want to open our time together right there. When you think about our church's mission, of course, is to make disciples from generation to generation. And that sounds great. But we're also making some other things too happen. And so I just want to know what your experience is with that, your family. What are the highs and lows of your family tree? And what do you think your family tree reveals about yourself and your upbringing and things like that? So let's just hop on right there.
I can start with some colorful characters. A father who was Hell's Angels, and we grew. I shouldn't say.
Would you ever guess that her dad was a Hell's Angel?
So much sense.
Miranda said absolutely.
You walked in wearing the black pants with the high heel boots or whatever, and the kind of long shirt that goes with it, and I've been like, you look like you belong on a motorcycle. Hello, thank I get it. I'm so there.
So Daddy grew greenery in our house. There was a room with locks on it, and we had lots of parties at our house with lots of other Hell's Angels. And my mother was, attended Woodstock, went to all the concerts, was a hippie, was every religion,
That's
that
actually
she
really
could.
cool.
I know. I mean, there's some real cool factor to my family for sure. But it's probably why I'm as colorful as I am.
Anybody else there? Okay.
And this is really random. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go for it.
In the second verse of the was it Corinthians? So in the second the name Azariah was listed twice.
Yeah, I
First
saw that.
and last. So did he have two sons named
Yes.
Azariah?
Yep.
That's
Interesting, huh?
crazy.
Yeah.
So while I have a microphone, I want to add to the colorful characters. My grandfather on my mama's side was a musician in Louisiana. He played on Louisiana Hayride. He hired and fired Elvis. He was offered to go on tour with Elvis and turned it down. He was friends with Junior, but not the junior, the senior, Hank Williams. He was friends with Hank Williams and Minnie Pearl and all these people, and he was an incredible guitarist and singer. And my mom used to sing on the radio and on the stage with him, and but my mom and dad decided to not carry on the whole drinking to the point of mom having to go get him out of the front yard or go to the next door neighbor's house or across the street house and get him because he went in the wrong house, that kind of thing. And they both decided to go to college, and it made my mom's grandmother, so my great grandmother, very she wanted mom to go be a secretary and then live her life and everything. And mom went to college and got a specialist degree. And so I've always been really intrigued and proud of my parents for that, and thankful that they did that and then passed it down to my sisters and I. It's always been pretty cool. Yeah. But I have always still idolized my grandfather as far as music is concerned. And I feel like because of that experience, people who make the choice to change their generation, to change their ancestry, their family, how it is going forward. Some people don't want to do it because they feel like it would be dishonorable or whatever. And I just want to say that you can change your stars, to steal from a movie, and still love the people that you came from, the places that you came from.
100%.
And I know that you're not you certainly weren't saying you couldn't, but I just want to say that it's been a hard thing for me to get some of my friends to understand that just because you're changing the way you do things does not mean you don't love your parents. Yeah. And that's something to think about.
That is a really great point. Thank you for sharing that. Really good. Yes, ma'am. He was a bigamist. Okay. And this is your biological dad. Okay. 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 Mm. Yeah. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Right. You have to be intentional about it.
What's interesting about that is if you don't know where you came from, to be able to compare yourself to what your life and your outcome is, like how much, it doesn't truly matter where you came from. And the capabilities, our of living out our life and a journey just based upon our worth through God, although you look at it and you see some connections and so forth, you really can grow that branch out and create something beautifully new, that can come from that.
Wow. Wow. So took kind of a bad situation, redeemed it, and in the process, you were. Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you brought up adoption because that's exactly what God does with all of us. Like you were saying you don't know your background or whatever. It's okay if you don't because you have a God who's like there to adopt you, which in a lot of ways was so comforting to me growing up in the way I did. Um,
Having a dad who wasn't very involved in my life because of his lifestyle, as a little girl yearning for that daddy who wasn't around, but understanding now that that could certainly have been God's grace and protection around me, finding out just a couple years ago that he can't enter the state of Texas. I don't know why. Yeah, and I don't want to know why. I don't know where else he can't. When he met Kenan, he brought moonshine to meet the pastor, the husband of his daughter.
so strong. I can't even drink a daiquiri, Jacob. But yeah, moonshine was tough. But same for me. Like when as sad as it was that my parents, my biological father passed when he was 29, and I was 11, and then my mom, and then my kind of adopted dad, passed during from COVID. And then my mom passed when she was 63, and I was probably in my early 30s. And so my mom never got to see my wife or meet my children. And I really think that that was one of the ways that God redeemed an otherwise hard story because she was an alcoholic and abusive and things like that. But one of the ways that I feel like God worked in that and redeemed and helped to break that cycle in my life and in our family's life was that she didn't because there was no influence there. And my sister Linda and I especially were very intentional with each other and our support and love for one another to break the cycles in our families because it was hard work to do that. And it wasn't popular amongst a lot of our family members and their friends, but we had to take a stand. And so what happened in all of that, what God did in all of that, was that I was the first person in my generation of my family that received a college degree, a college education. And then my sister's children received college educations, both of them. And so you can absolutely, if you're intentional, break those cycles that hold families, down. And I'm very proud of that. And then, there's other things though that did affect our family. The pattern of divorce continued. The pattern of both of my sisters were divorced. I haven't been and don't intend to be. You're not going to divorce me, are you? Oh, thank you, because I just couldn't even imagine that. I couldn't imagine life without you. But here's the deal, though. Divorce is a real situation in families, and it can be passed down, the desire for that. And that's hard. That's hard. That's a covenant that we cut with God. And so that's more than just you two as a relationship. That's a relationship. And so I do not agree with the Catholic Church. I don't think that if people divorce, that means that they shouldn't be able to be part of the communion table. I disagree with that, and that's probably why I'm United Methodist, because I don't believe in that kind. I think that's ungracious, personally. Theologically, I believe that God is more gracious than us, and so the more gracious thing would be an inclusive table where all people come together, and I believe that God is more gracious than us. 100%. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. And that to hear that is such an uplifting story, because my mother and we sat down and she looked at me and she acknowledged one night on my back porch. We were just sitting, relaxed, and having a real honest conversation. And she looked at me and she said, "I know that I drink and that's a problem. And I know it's caused you a lot of heartache and pain in your life." And she goes, "And I know that I'll never stop. It's just got me too much. But I do want you to know that I love the Lord. I do want you to know that I believe in God." And it was a sad conversation and a hard conversation, but I was relieved to hear her say those things. But see, it doesn't always turn around. Sometimes it doesn't. But what's interesting is her father, who was a preacher before he received his calling, he was also an abusive alcoholic. So see where she got that? So she, he was an abusive alcoholic. He said that a light appeared to him in an alfalfa field and told him that he was going to preach God's word. And he said, "How is that possible? I can't even read." And so my grandmother, in a time where women didn't tell men what to do, sat on the front pew and corrected his English as he preached to his first congregations and taught him to read and be literate. It's an amazing story. So see, all this generational stuff is real, this stuff. I mean, it really does happen, and it really does influence and impact the world. Like, I want to ask you a question, Dee, because you sing back there, and you're just an incredible teacher of the word. Is that in your bloodline? Is music and faith and all that stuff in your bloodline, or?
Not necessarily singing well, but just singing a lot.
You sing beautiful.
But I did want to say something here. To me, the most important thing when we talk about the family tree is it's wonderful, helpful to understand where we came from as we look back down the tree. But the only part that God's really worried about and concerned with is where we go going forward, because that's our tree. That is our tree.
That's so good. And that's what this is about as we look at the rearview mirror. The awareness that we're leaving something in our wake is what's important, and it matters. And so you get this weird story about the king who led his people to unfaithfulness. And there's a couple of things that stood out to me in this story. As one of them is that God punished. There were consequences for him leading people to unfaithfulness to the fourth generation. But then God's merciful in that the kings who led their people to faithfulness and obedience in God's word were blessed to the 1,000th generation. And so real different outcomes based on that. And so it kind of makes me think, like, what are we doing? Like, what are we doing to be intentional about what's in our rearview mirror, in our wake. Like, what are we leaving behind here? And do we want to be the ones that are leading anyone to unfaithfulness and face the consequences of that? Or do we want to choose to change? And that's really what it boils down to. So let me hear from you now about times where you've had to choose to change. Like that, I think that would be helpful, especially if it pertains to like something from your past or something related to what your family may have passed. When have you had to choose to change? Yeah, go Jacob.
A huge thing for me in my life growing up was when I was really young. My dad was an alcoholic at first. He actually cut that generational cycle off because my papa was a crazy abusive alcoholic, and dad started to follow in that cycle. But then one day he was outside drinking with his buddies, and he always said, I just won't go to a bar. I'm gonna be home with my kids. But he would stay home and get obnoxiously drunk. And one day I came outside to come hang out with dad, and he shooed me back inside because him and his buddies were all obnoxious and drinking and stuff. And he said it hit him that day that he was doing the same thing, except it was worse because he was home. And so he decided to quit drinking then and there. And he cut that off, thank God. But then one thing that kind of hung around was that that abusive nature, that underlying like emotional abusive nature. And he really put my mom through a lot. And so for the very beginning of my life, I didn't know what it looked like to respect women. I didn't know what it looked like to hold them in their proper places. It was kind of a man's world, and that was my mindset for like the first 15 years of my life until he grew and he realized what he was doing, and he realized the damage that he was doing to my mom. And he made a massive change when he was like 35. And that's when the Lord got me, and the Lord started working on my heart, and I started realizing that, I really haven't honored my mother the way that she deserves to be honored my entire life. And so it wasn't until Jesus invaded my heart that I realized, I don't respect women, and it was that, like, just flat out like that. And I had to actively pay attention to that. I had to be intentional with like recognizing ways that, my mom and my sisters are irreplaceable, and honoring that correctly. And it was this all happened like 10 years ago. I was like 18, 19 years old. And the Lord just kind of set my heart in a right direction. And it was incredible what that did for my relationship with my mom, because she'll tell you when the Lord got me and he started showing me these things and I started changing, we became friends and we got really close, and it's been really rich to cultivate that, especially after all the hell that I put that woman through.
Yeah.
I was it was looking back, it's, the Lord himself has had to be like, hey, I forgive you. So you need to forgive me.
That is a vulnerable and a very powerful testimony, and I hope you share it with every young man in this church. Yeah. I really do. And what? And not in this church, that's right. I hope you share it with as many people as you can, because that is a really important word. Yeah. So kind of the point of this thing is that, we come to this time where the scripture requires us to make a choice, to choose. The disobedient thing is to just let things go, sweep them under the rug like so many generations have done in the past, act like it's not happening. I mean, I remember growing up in my day that it was taboo to talk about the sins of the family. You never did that.
Currently, I have some friends that are going through the same thing, where like their whole family, they won't talk about very, very real issues that are going on. And it's like, the whole, from the grandparents to the parents to the current generation, they're all just like, oh yeah, we just pretend like all that, like abuse and all that
Didn't
really
happen.
bad stuff didn't happen. We don't talk about it. I'm like, that's not.
It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't help anything. In fact, it just stews a whole pot of. That's correct. That's correct. You can perpetuate it. Or you can cope in unhealthy ways. I mean, sitting on information or things for fear that your family will disown you, or if you say the things that are true out loud, then you're somehow going to be banished or further harmed. That's not a healthy way of dealing with family
My
stuff.
mom used to be open and would like talk about the kind of not too aggressive when I was like super little, but like she was in a pretty abusive situation with her mom and never knew who her dad was because her mom just kind of was that kind of lady back in the day, and so that was a hard thing for her that she grew up and promised that she wanted to be nothing. She wanted to be a mom, and she wanted to make sure that her kids had everything that she didn't have.
Yep.
And that was a big thing that she had said, and so like, and she told me that. I mean, she still tells me that to this day.
Yeah.
But,
Sharing our shortcomings in our families it's not sinful. It's not gossip. In fact, if you're using it to help somebody, it's actually quite healthy, so that they don't feel like they're the only one in that situation. And so really, really important.
So when my children, got old enough for me to talk to them, I would tell them. They'd ask me questions about things, and I would give them a straight answer, and I always have given them like the truth, And Mom heard me explaining. I don't know what it was, but Mom heard me explaining something one day to one of them, and she pulled me aside and was like, "Why do you tell them all of what happened, the whole story?" And I was like, "Because I don't want them to repeat, what I did, or I don't want them to. I never want to not share with them, my life. I want them to know me." And she was like, "Well, we didn't do that with you." And I was like, "I know." And
Exactly
because
the
of
point.
that, I didn't know exactly who I was until I was like 20. When you told me you were afraid of snakes, for example, I was like 19 and I had a snake, but you had never told me that you were afraid of snakes. And when you found out that I was claustrophobic, but didn't like to be, I was stuck in an elevator with a friend, and you tell me all of a sudden your fear of small spaces, which I never knew my whole life, and you tell me when I'm 19 years old, and I'm like, I want my kids to know me and to know these things so that they know where they get it from, or they know where it came from.
That's right. It can be unhealthy not to talk about it if you don't talk about it.
And Mom was just like, "Oh, well, we always thought that maybe you wouldn't have those things." But I said, "Well, I definitely don't have the fear of snakes that you have. I don't have the fear of heights that my dad had. Yeah. But still, I may not have had those anyway. Just because it's not passing them down to your kid to tell your kid that you have them. Mm-hmm. You do it in a way where, well, I have this, but you probably don't. Yeah. But you can still talk to them. Yeah. And I guess that's one of the things that I changed about the way I was brought up to the way I brought my children up. And it baffles my mom to this day every now and then. But then again, she goes, "I'm really glad that you talk to your kids just like, freely."
Yeah. That's such a good point. I was 7 when my family told me that I had a different father than the rest of my brothers and sisters. Do you know how mad I was? You know how hurt I was, how angry? And then when my father, the real one, died when I was 11, I was furious again, all over again, because those were years that I felt they stole from me by lying to me, by making me think that one thing was true when actually a whole different thing was true. And so I blamed them for stealing 7 years of life with my father and me only having 4. And so, that kind of stuff messes with a kid's head because you're not old enough to be able to process all of that. And so years later, I'm sitting with a counselor going, "I'm messed up." And he's like, "Well, God, no wonder, that's valid. I mean, that's fair." And so, yeah. So here's the deal. Choose to change. If there's stuff in your history that that you know isn't leading you to the right path. A choice to change is honorable. That's what David did, and he became a king that is after God's own heart. You know, these people weren't perfect. David was far from it. We all know that. But well, at least we're not talking about his irritable bowel syndrome. You know, we're talking about the legacy and bloodline of faith that Jesus came from. And so let's sing this out.